All right, so we'll just jump right into this. Today we're gonna talk a little bit about the stability of our rockets and how that affects the flight. So two real things that we're going to talk about with our rockets today is what's called the center of pressure and the center of gravity. So for the apprentice rockets, I've already measured it out. The center of pressure is right here on our rocket. And basically what this little red mark stands for is all the different forces on this rocket that affect it as it flies. They kind of come to balance point right here. So you have drag and you have thrust and you have the weight of the rocket, and all of those things play in to determine where the center of pressure is. So if we were to move the fins forward, generally speaking, it would actually move the center of pressure forward as well. So because our fins are right at the back edge of the rocket, it does show, or our center of pressure now is right here. But so basically, what does that mean for us? Not a whole lot. This is pretty well the same once you've built the rocket. You can put stuff in it that'll change the weight, that may change the center of pressure a little bit, but it won't be much. So really what we're talking about is the center of pressure in relation to the center of gravity. So how do we find the center of gravity for this rocket? There's a number of ways. You can look it up on a rocket simulator. I've looked it up. I know where it is. But the easier way is to get a piece of string, tie a little loop in your piece of string, and I'm sorry about the auto exposure on this thing. It's going crazy. But you make a little loop and you just slip it over your rocket and you tighten it down, and then you just hold your rocket up. And you want to do this when you have an engine in it, right? So you can find your center of gravity without the engine, but it's important to also do that with the engine that you're actually flying, just to make sure that you're going to be stable. So this is not your center of gravity yet, so we're just going to slide it back a little bit, see if it balances. That was too far. So right about there. So now what we're showing you is the relationship, this string, to my red mark, the center of pressure. So we're going to go ahead and measure this now. Let me put a piece of tape to mark my spot on the center of gravity. So now, in order to have a stable flight, what we need is the distance from the center of pressure to the center of gravity to be more than the width of our rocket. So the width of our rocket, it's in the instruction manual, is 24 millimeters. So I'm just going to measure from this piece of tape to this piece of tape and make sure that it's more than one tube width apart, which is 24 millimeters. So I've got my ruler here, and it is about 70 millimeters or so. So we've got plenty of room to be a stable rocket. Okay, so now when we put an engine in this, and let me put an expent engine in here, that is going to change our center of gravity, because now we put weight into the back. Okay, so we're still not stable. A little too far. A little too far. Not quite there yet. Okay, so that's pretty well balanced, and now you can see that the center of gravity has changed because the weight changed. We added an engine into the back. And so your center of gravity will move as you add stuff in here, or if you put something else up here, it will move. But let's just make sure that we are still, what is that, about 4.5 centimeters, so 45 millimeters away. So we still have plenty of room. So that's basically how to make a stable rocket. You will look up where your center of pressure is, measure it and mark it, and then you'll find your balance point, and you're going to measure it and make sure that you're in the right spot. So that's pretty much it. So what this is called in the slideshow is one caliber stability. Excuse me. So one caliber being the caliber is the width of your rocket. One caliber away is one caliber stability, right? And that's kind of where you want to be, one caliber or better. So in the case of this rocket, it's 24 millimeters or better. If you have a bigger rocket that's bigger around, you know, maybe that's 38 millimeters that you want away from it. So it's always going to change. Every rocket's going to be different. On the Estes Alpha rocket that some of you are making, the center of pressure is going to be right back here, behind the leading edge of the fin, right? So your center of gravity would probably need to be somewhere where, or your center of gravity needs to be somewhere near where my center of pressure mark is on this one, right? But your rocket is shaped different, and so you will see yours should balance in front of that point somewhere. So the next thing that we can do, well, let's talk about what happens if you make your rocket too stable. So let's say your rocket is very front heavy. Let's say that you have a rocket like this, that you can put a lot of weight in the front end of it. So that would change your center of gravity from being somewhere back here to being way up here. I'll give you a quick example. This is already without any engines in it or anything like that, no eggs. It's pretty far forward as far as the balance point goes. I'm slipping. So it's about halfway up that rocket is the balance point. So if you put two eggs in here, all of a sudden your center of gravity is going to be way, way up here. So if your center of pressure is back here by the fins and your center of gravity is way towards the front, you will have a situation that is what's called an overstable rocket. So when you're getting into a tube width that's maybe, I think this is about 40 millimeters, when you're getting maybe 80 millimeters or more away, that's when you get into the situation that's called an overstable rocket. So basically what happens is your center of gravity is where it's going to pivot if something happens, if the wind blows it. So on this rocket, if the wind blows it, the center of gravity is going to pivot right where my fingers are. Right? I'm sorry, let me turn that. So right where my fingers are. So you've got a lot of room for it to correct itself and go back the other way. What happens with an overstable rocket, if the wind blows on the fins here, right, it pivots way up at the top. And so what can happen is the wind can actually blow the bottom out of it, and the rocket will attempt to stabilize at that new direction. So it can actually turn into the wind horizontally. So it's kind of dangerous to have an overstable rocket. It's not necessarily bad, but you have to just be aware if you're flying with weight in the front and you're in that situation where your stability point is right up near the top, that you can turn into the wind and have your rocket flying horizontally, which is dangerous. Because the next step is it could fly down. And we definitely don't want that. So that's about that. We want to try and make sure our center of gravity is towards the rear or towards the center of pressure, but not so close that it makes the rocket unstable, because then it would flex at this point, or it would turn at this point really close to the rocket or the center of pressure. So, so honestly, that is about the class. Like I said, this was going to be a real quick class, and this is our last one, unfortunately. But so the next step for you guys to do, and you don't have to do this right away, but before you fly it, so once you get a motor in your rocket, you'll definitely want to do this, because you want to do it with the right weight. But you're going to take your rocket, and you're going to put your string over it, and you're going to find your balance point, and you're going to make sure then, instead of just a loop over it, that you actually tie this on so it stays right at your center of gravity. Maybe take a piece of tape and put it over your string to hold it down. Okay, and you want at least 6 feet of string or more in order to do this test properly. But you're going to go outside and you're going to have a parent, and you're going to take and you're going to start swinging it around your head, right? Pretty dangerous, and it's going to fly around your head, and you're going to just let out more and more line until you get it out away from you. So if you do everything right and your center of gravity and your center of pressure are in the right spots and everything is in balance, your rocket should fly on the end of that string as you're spinning it around. It should fly nice and straight all the way around. If it's not, you may have a wobble, and it may fly like that all the way around you. If you're not quite right where you're marked where your center of gravity should be, what can happen is it will turn around and fly backwards. So there's a number of different things. You want the rocket to fly like a rocket as it's spinning around you on that piece of string. Again, be careful, keep away from little kids, all that sort of thing. Have a parent there to help you with this. But you're going to want some heavier string that's going to be easy to tie around the rocket at the center of gravity. So that's about it. If you've gotten this far, you are pretty well ready to fly your rockets, and I really look forward to seeing what you guys all created and seeing your rockets fly. So hopefully it all went well, and we'll talk to y'all soon. I forgot one thing. If your rocket does fly like this, you want to adjust the center of gravity. So how would we do that with our rockets if it's flying like this and going all crazy? Well, what we can do is we can add weight to the front end. So a couple different ways you can do this. You can drill a hole in the bottom, like a pretty big hole in the bottom of your nose cone, and you can fill it with clay, something that's going to be heavy like that. And when I say clay, I mean like modeling clay from Michael's or something. The other thing you can do is you can take pennies and you can tape or glue them inside the body tube on the wall. Remember, your parachute has to come past them. So you can do that, or you can take some modeling clay and smear it around the inside of your tube to build up a little bit of extra weight there. But it actually shouldn't take much to get your rocket to fly nice and straight. So that's about the only way to adjust your center of gravity, because remember, we want that 24 millimeters or better in between our 2 points, the center of pressure and the center of gravity. Okay? All right. I'm really done this time. We'll talk to you guys later.